All right, welcome back, Community Focus here on Channel 6 TV. I'm Kenny Fogel. Glad that you can join us tonight. We're going to talk a little bit of politics. I know you never get enough of talking politics in the world, but we're going to do it a little bit anyway because it's what makes the world go around, and we try to make sure everybody's well informed before they make any decisions or just know what's going on in their life. We've got Alan Brown Jr. here with us today. Alan is the Vice Chairman of the Republican Party of Nelson County. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
And you're a growing organization. I mean, if I went back 20 years ago and I said the Republican Party of Nelson County, I'd be talking to maybe just a handful of people. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore, is it?
No, not at all. Our registration has been growing. It's a great time to be a Republican, and you could really see that at the caucus we had this year. I don't know if you saw, but there was a huge line, and it was moving quickly, but I don't know that I've ever seen that many Republicans in one place in Nelson County before. It was really invigorating.
Did the success of the caucus surprise you, or is that basically what you expected?
I was always a proponent of the caucus. I actually voted for it on the state central committee. But I had to say I was impressed. You know, I thought moving it up would give us more representation because we'd be voting early enough to make a difference. Yeah. But I didn't really expect a 6% turnout increase, which is 12. It was 12% in the 2012 primary. So we had a huge increase. And just having everyone at one location rather than spread out at the precincts, it was great. I think everyone seemed to really enjoy seeing each other and the energy and whatnot, and we definitely had our say earlier than May.
Well, they actually brought a few people in, so they're paying attention anyway.
Absolutely.
What do you see there right now? The Republican Party, obviously, everything changes as you go. The government changes, people change, as technology changes as well. So, the Republican Party moving with that change, or what do you see now as the strong? If you had to describe what makes the Republican Party tick, what would you say is really drawing people to the Republican Party or the place to be?
I think a lot of it has to do with, frankly, candidates like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and Chad McCoy who are interested in upholding the entire Bill of Rights. It used to be, you know, each party focused on a few amendments and sort of didn't talk about the
Ignored some of them.
Right. But now we're seeing these candidates come forward that really are supporting the whole Bill of Rights. And it's really, I think, fresh influence. That's what drew me into the party. I'm definitely a supporter of the Pauls. And that sort of, those principles and that conviction and that vision for the world that's a little bit skeptical of government being able to solve all the problems and leans more towards empowering the individual. That's definitely a compelling vision, and I think that's had a lot to do with the growth of the party. In fact, to support that, I will say that in the 4th District, which is where Thomas Massie represents, Republican registration surpassed Democrat for the first time ever just recently. And I like to think he has a lot to do with that.
Well, you've got a lot of candidates, obviously. Obviously, you're just leaving out the presidential candidate race, which is not completely settled yet, but it pretty much mostly is. And I don't get into that as much because it's a little beyond what I can handle. But basically, you've got Rand Paul. He's got some opposition this year. And you've got Chad McCoy with some opposition. Brett Guthrie, no real serious opposition, I don't think, anyway. So it looks pretty bright for the local Republicans right now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think, a lot of people didn't give Governor Bevin much chance of winning, and it showed how we're moving in that direction. And then with Rand, you have just so much to like in a candidate, I think, that can really reach across party lines. And I've just recently been learning about Chad and finding out some of the same stuff too. He's I think he'll continue the same sort of conservative leadership we had with David Floyd. But in addition to that, he also has, as I said, a big focus on the Bill of Rights. He's very excited about preserving the right to trial by jury, to due process and civil liberties, things like that you don't always see emphasized on the Republican side. So I think that'll have a good cross-partisan appeal, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about all of it. So.
Well, you know, one of the things I hear complaints about all the time, whether it's Democrat or Republican, somebody says, what difference does it make? What difference does it make what you are? You don't have a voice anyway. Do you feel like you have a voice in making a difference in the Republican Party?
Absolutely, and that took a little bit of work, actually. I would say that when I first got really involved in politics in 2007 or 2008, I was like, you know, what's with these conventions and all this? And I took a while to study the rules and learn what it was about. And then I realized it really is great because the system allows people to get involved from, at least theoretically, from every county and precinct and sort of influence the party there. It's supposed to be from the bottom up. That said, the establishment likes to control things from the top down, so there's always sort of that tension. But I think for people who actually get involved, there's tremendous opportunity. And we've seen, again, for those people who supported Ron Paul in 2008, is sort of, you know, the disappointment of losing a presidential election, especially when that was one of the first people they could ever really genuinely support. Rolled right over into the awesome victory of Rand just a couple years later. And a few people know this fact, but Rand had his victory party in the very building where the Republican establishment wouldn't let him speak at the district convention 2 years before.
A little ironic.
Yeah, I would say so. So yeah, I mean, just seeing what, you know, a ragtag bunch of people who believe in liberty and the Constitution can accomplish. And really, I think, to some extent, the Republican Party is a little bit more open to that. They have fewer superdelegates, so more direct elections in an election year, which I think sort of helps the grassroots. And then I see movements toward a caucus and stuff like that as also sort of empowering the grassroots, whereas a primary might favor, to some extent, those with a lot of money for advertising and with media connections and so on. So yeah, I absolutely feel.
Well, that's been my argument all the time. Is I've heard many people say, "What difference does it make?" But again, and that's why I left out the presidential race, because sometimes I think we do feel like we get lost in the 50-state flow, because it does get pretty big. But locally, we can make a difference. I mean, locally, the average person out there that says that doesn't matter who you're for or anything else, but you can get involved and you can have a voice. It might take, like I said, it might take a couple years to learn the system, but you can have a voice if you just show up.
Absolutely. I mean, even in a statewide primary, you remember the race between Matt Bevin and Jamie Comer was decided by 84 votes,
right.
Less than one vote per county. And I saw another race just recently in Louisville, where the Republican primary was for Metro Council, I think, was decided by 4 votes.
Yeah.
So everyone thinks their vote doesn't count, but in a caucus or a convention situation, you amplify your vote and your voice. And furthermore, you never know when those elections are going to end up too close to call. So.
Well, give me a couple issues you think we really need to be looking at right now. What is, if somebody out there just pays attention a little bit and they say, you know, what's going on, what difference does it make? I know Real ID got to be an issue. I mean, there are several different issues that people wants to talk about. And, you know, I can take a side in one, I can take a side in another, but some of them I don't know enough about to argue one way or the other. Right. What do you think right now people need to be paying attention to?
Well, Real ID was an amazing story this year. But as far as, you know, things that really have an influence on a lot of people, I think a huge debate we're having in our country is over the regulatory environment, you know. It's cost the coal industry a lot of jobs, and that's something that people really feel. So I think for me personally, this isn't a subject that doesn't get a whole lot of discussion. But the Federal Reserve, the fact that they can basically create money out of thin air and then distribute it to their cronies and whatnot. I mean, think about that. Money is half of every transaction that we make. Therefore, the power to set the price of money essentially it's involved in every single transaction, and the inflation increases the price of goods and services that we need to live. So I think starting with an audit is a great thing. And that has a lot of bearing on our abilities to feed our families and maintain a good standard of living. So rolling back some of those overreaching federal regulations, I think would help our economy a lot, and I also think some scrutiny of the Federal Reserve would too.
Well, we've been having this argument ever since with Alexander Hamilton, I think, and it's been going on, and every year the federal government grows a little bit more. I can't remember it shrinking any in the last many years.
Right.
So I know that's a tough battle, but you see that as one of the things that we really have to keep your eye on the ball.
Absolutely, and that's something that I think our party could stand on improving. Rhetorically, we talk about cutting spending and cutting government, but when we get there, it doesn't really happen. And you can sort of understand this when you talk to people. A lot of them are in favor of cutting government spending and cutting government
They won't cut yours, they don't cut mine.
Exactly. There's an issue or two.
Yeah.
And so this is why Rand and others have pointed out that if we're ever going to get serious, we have a $19 trillion debt and it's just increasing. Both sides are going to have to agree to cut spending, and not hold on to that one thing, because with Republicans, sometimes it's military spending, and then with Democrats, it's domestic spending, and they're like, okay, we'll cut the other stuff, but we won't cut this. You can't reach any kind of agreement that way if you're hanging on to your spending, or you will reach an agreement, and that will be to spend more for both,
Yeah.
which is what happens. And of course, they do it very dramatically at the last hour. Oh, we have to pass this bill to keep spending.
Right.
But that's what gives me hope, and I think it's so important to elect those true believers like Rand, as it were, that aren't just mouthing the lines for politics, but they actually believe it, and they're going to try to get something done. And that includes working with across the aisle when you can agree. Not in a politically calculated way to say, oh, this will help my election, but because, I agree, I believe in this, and this guy over here believes in it. Let's just do it.
Finding common ground.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, polarization, gridlock, whatever you want to call it, obviously is. Some people like it. They think it's a good thing because it slows government down. But some people see that as the biggest issue we've got going right now between our political parties. I'm going to vote my way because my leadership told me that's the way to vote. And I know I've talked to, you mentioned Thomas Massey. I had a conversation with him one time about how he voted not with leadership, and he got in a lot of trouble over it. So I know he's rocked the boat a few times.
Yes, if anyone out there wants some interesting stories from Congress,
he's got some good ones.
They should look him up on YouTube, because some of those are just unbelievable. But yeah, definitely when it comes to compromise, it's always mandated by the leadership,
right.
And very little is done between the actual members based on their beliefs, based on what Thomas says. And furthermore, they try to lump all these things into one bill. And the reason they do this is because they're trying to, buy votes for the overall thing that they get. But what this ends up doing is it actually kills a lot of good legislation, because
or some bad legislation gets passed.
Exactly, because people are not, they're not dealing with an issue at a time. Maybe 80% of Congress could agree on one fix or other, but it's such a good selling point, the leadership saves it for some bill that they want to buy votes with or other. So, yeah.
It could use a lot of improvement. Alan, are you a political junkie? You one of these guys that just gets glued to, because around election time you're all just charged up? Or
I guess a little bit of it depends on which candidates are involved.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a naturally political person.
Yeah.
I sort of, I enjoy my alone time and whatnot, and I'm not always out there shaking hands and that sort of thing. But that being said, when I see something really exciting like the grassroots fighting it out in the convention, man, I watched a streaming video of the Washington State Convention in 2008 just because of what the grassroots were trying to do and what they were able to accomplish.
Well, I know I've seen you out on the sidewalks with a fan walking. So that's pretty grassroots.
Yes, I would say so. And I don't know how often that happened in Bardstown before we started sign waving, but when we first started doing it, we got some pretty strange looks and reactions. But now it's like a sort of an accepted pastime. Everyone honks and waves. And
well, if somebody locally wanted to learn a little bit more about what you're doing locally, or to get more involved, how do they get a hold of you, or what's resource do they need to have to find out what's going on?
Well, the Republican Party of Nelson County does have a Facebook page, and that's a great way to keep up with what we're doing. And you can also send messages if you have a direct inquiry, so that might be the best way to contact us, and that'll get to either me or Robert Augustine, who's the chairman, and we should be able to help you out from there. And I'm sure we've had a Lincoln dinner and some events already this year, and I'm sure we'll have some more coming up before the election. So yeah, we'd love to meet people and get them involved and plugged in. So.
All right, well, you're making a difference. I mean, that's what, is that what keeps you up at night, or makes you gets you fired up every day, or what is it that motivates Alan Brown Jr.?
I think so. The government I envision with a freer market that's able to supply goods and services to citizens at lower rates and more efficiently, and just increase the standard of living. I see that vision, and that may sound complex or whatever, but that's sort of what motivates me.
Yeah.
I believe that freedom works, and I want to do my part to bring that into play again. So
when's the campaign starting? I know Chad McCoy's getting ready to fire up his campaign. Obviously Rand Paul, and I mentioned Brett Guthrie. Really not fire. I don't even know if he has any opposition, to be honest with you. But we're getting ready to go into campaign season, but we've got a little lull before that. So are you pretty optimistic people are getting ready and on the right track for this year?
I think so. I don't really know how to judge that, but I think there's going to be a lot of interest, and Rand won he did have some primary opponents, and he won by a pretty considerable margin.
Right.
So I think, it's looking good, and I'm looking forward to it. Always a good day when I get to vote for Rand. So.
There you go. And Alan Brown Jr. here, he's the Vice Chairman of the Republican Party of Nelson County. We do appreciate you taking time out of your day to stop in here and talk to us and let us know what's going on. And we're going to have you back in this fall, obviously. We have you come back in as we get closer to election time and discuss maybe some of the issues and some of the candidates. And obviously they change on a daily basis. We could talk about one issue today, and September might be something totally else that's on the people's minds. So we will have you back in later in the year to see where we are.
Sounds good. I'll look forward to it.
I look forward to having you. Appreciate you being here. Stick around, a lot more to come. And Alan with us today, and we'll have more here on Channel 6 TV talking politics. You don't know what we're going to talk about any day of the week. So again, we're going to change topics on you real quick as well. So stick around. We got a lot more to come here on Channel 6 TV, and we'll be back right after these commercials.